Well, here we are, another episode, and I think it's almost Thanksgiving. Is this a theme-based podcast today, Renee?
It's a one-off themed base. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. But we're going to focus today on the science and the practice of gratitude, because it's really, really important. And as we head into this week, this year of all years, I've said that for the last five, but of all years, maybe we should be a little more grateful this year. There's just a lot going on in our world. And so there really is some science about this. So we're going to dive into that today, talk about the science behind it, talk about some data related to it, and give you a couple of resources in the show notes. If you're not sure how to install a practice of gratitude or want to get more involved with that, we'll do that. But before we get there, Jason, what is going on the farm now? It's awfully dark out there.
Oh, it's really dark, and we're done with harvest, but now it's that maintenance stuff that has to
Yeah.
happen, and I think I need to climb up and fix that light that's on the top of the grain bin, the wet bin, because I'd always have to carry my flashlight up the steps to look in, and right now the corn is still all the way up to the lid or up to the ceiling, so I can stand on the corn and fix the light. Otherwise, I need like a 40-foot ladder, or you actually have to build scaffolding inside grain bins when they're so big to climb all the way up to fix something on the ceiling. So I need to replace the light bulb. I think it's the whole lighting mechanism. So this is the things I need to do, but I only can go out in the evening, so it's dark. So I have to take lights up and extension cords, and then hopefully pick up the right thing at Menards or Lowe's or
So
wherever I
you have
go to
to
get a.
stand on corn in a bin to fix a
It's the
ceiling.
light that's on the inside, so you can
Because
see,
if
right?
you
Like so.
let the corn out, it'll be too low, and then you can't fix the
Right, because
ceiling.
then when the bin's empty, it's clear up there on the ceiling that's, 40
Right,
feet
that's
in the
far.
air, and then you can't fix anything. Because the
Yeah.
electrician, this is an older bin, he put it in the
Ah,
middle, the light. If he put it like
wow.
by the door where I could reach in and do it, like that would be
Like
more
a normal
useful. But
person.
this was an
Okay.
electrician issue 8 years ago. Poor planning. Maybe that was poor planning. I'm not sure. But, these are the things I think about all the time. This is the things on my list. Like you have that list
Maybe
of things on the farm that have to get done. It's one of the things on my list.
maybe it was a decision so that you'd have to call him to come fix it. Because if
It
you
could
put
be,
it
but
by
like I
the
said, it gets
door,
expensive. But he's got
that's
to
if you put it
build
by the door, you could do it yourself. And maybe he didn't want you to do it by yourself, so he put it in the middle, so you had to call him.
probably,
Right?
right?
See, so there might be some method to his
Oh,
madness.
of course,
Might be some
right?
method.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to add one little new segment this week. My Midwest complaint. It's cold, people. And I was just telling Jason, so I don't like socks. I try not to wear shoes with toes, but I live in the Midwest, so that messes up several months of my year because that just doesn't work out. So I go to put socks on and they don't stay. They just don't stay. They either fall off, they roll down, they do whatever. So I'm in the process of like putting them on, seeing if they work, to get rid of some socks, even though they look like good socks. But how good are socks if they don't stay where they go? So it's just irritating. The Midwest problem because it's winter. And if it was summer, I wouldn't care. Those socks could just stay right there in that drawer and be happy, but they're not working out. So anyway, grateful for socks. We're going to work on gratitude, but not for those specific socks because they're a pain in the tail. So today, Jason, we're going to talk about the some of the mental and emotional benefits of gratitude. And a lot of people, for those that aren't sure what gratitude is, it's about being thankful. So it's a practice of being thankful. And it came from a lot of spirituality backgrounds. The Bible talks about that. A lot of other religions talk about that. But as it's become more popular in our language these last few years, it actually has a lot of science behind it too. So we're going to blend those things together because it's not just about gratitude for those that may be not spiritual or who don't have a faith-based belief system. You may be thinking, I don't like gratitude. Well, actually, from the scientific perspective, it's helpful for you too. So we're going to talk about it from the side of science today and show you how that's really helpful. So what are some of the mental and emotional benefits of being grateful or practicing gratitude?
Well, I think there's so many, right? And as we think about it's kind of perspective taking, right? Like as
Yeah.
we think about our perspective, if we have a more positive perspective and a more positive, even in difficult times, perspective of how we view the world, then things are more likely to go better, and to be a little bit less stressful, even during stressful times. And so when I think about, how do we help boost resilience? How do we strengthen relationships?
Mhm.
How do we manage our emotions when there's lots of stuff going on around us? It really does come down to how we approach things, right, Renee?
Yeah. So what gratitude really does, it helps you focus on the moment. So it's a grounding technique. So if you've heard about grounding techniques, it keeps you focused on now. And a lot of depression is about things that you wish you woulda, coulda, shoulda done in the past. And anxiety often is about what's coming ahead. Like we can't control tomorrow, can't control the next hour. And so we're worried about the future. And so what gratitude really does is sort of center you and focus you on right now. Like in this one moment, what are we grateful for in this minute? And it's similar to things like some of the breathing mechanisms that you can do, or some of the lots of different mechanisms out there to kind of center you in the now. And with all of the information overload in our world right now, it is really hard to get recentered. We're always ahead of where we are looking at information and across the world and catastrophes elsewhere, and it just doesn't bring us to now. So this is one of those practices that can help you now, but there's also physical benefits to this that they're finding in research. So tell us about some of those physical benefits.
Well, the favorite one we talk about all the time is getting better sleep. We talk over and over again, the number one thing you can do to boost your health and your emotional well-being is get good sleep.
Right.
And gratitude helps people fall asleep, sleep more soundly, get that good sleep that's actually rejuvenating for people. And so that's a huge when we think about heart health, we think about lowering stress. All of those things are benefits to physical health that really compound and mean more than just those things individually, right? It helps
Yeah.
boost us overall.
Yep. This is a practice. I've talked about this on podcasts before, and I'll talk about my favorite tool in a minute when I get to my recovering politician self-care policy. But I use this practice. I started this practice out of sheer necessity when I was running for public office. And for those that haven't heard my public office story, in a nutshell, was never my plan. I didn't even take government classes in school, minus the ones I absolutely had to get out. I did not think about that. So I was kind of recruited to run, and then I really hated the mental health system. So I was like, well, shoot, if I did that, I'd go fix it. But once I got into it, it was hard and I didn't like it. But you can't get your name back off a ballot once you're on a ballot. And so I was heading into election and I just didn't want to be doing it anymore. But you're stuck. You're like, I want to quit, but my name's on this ballot. I can't quit. And the negative mail was so much. Just the negative. I was on TV with George W. Bush, whom I've never met. I forget why. And then I was privatizing Medicare or Medicaid, which you can't do, and all these other things. And I was turned into cartoon characters in mailers and flyers. I was a queen of hearts because I was a gamble, too risky to take, and some other things. And it was just more than I can handle. So I started just cutting out the news out of my life. But in addition to that, started figuring out, okay, what is good about this? Because it was hard. I was like, what is good? Because everything seemed so negative. So I started my practice way back when. And so it's been a daily piece of my life, and it really has changed my health. And so it's exciting to see it finally coming out in information. So we have some data I think we're going to talk about today, and there's a couple of different places that have books and things that we can talk more about. So talk to us about the data. What are we seeing and how this is actually
I
working or
really want to go
helping
back to
people?
the Queen of Hearts because I think we need to use that somewhere
I
in
actually think I have
something.
it. It's in, I'm actually on a card deck as a Queen of Hearts
Yeah.
with my face. I'm pretty sure I have it.
I'm,
The other thing that I did, besides stopping reading them, watching TV and media, I had my husband or people like in my trust circle look at all that mail and stuff. And I just
mhm,
didn't until after the election because I just couldn't
right.
handle it. And so then when I got to it after the election, I was like, are you kidding? But I'd do door knocking and see flyers from my opponent with my
Mhm,
face on it in a new
right.
mailbox. And sometimes if they'd answered the door and the mail was there, I'd just say, that's me. Could I have that? And they'd look at it and they'd be like, that doesn't look like you. But I'm like, well, that'd be
Yep.
me. I'm like, so can I
Yeah.
have it? And they would just hand it to me and I'd shove it in my
Right.
bag. So I would see what the mailers were and whatever. But yeah, wild. But I still have it. So you can have it too. But don't we have some data about this that talks about how we
Well,
can figure out our resilience and stuff
we
through all
we
this?
do, and I kind of like, when we talk about gratitude, I've just listened to a book by Chan Hellman, and so it kind of moves us to the next step of the science of hope. And I don't know if you know much about the science of hope, Renee, but really that's the framework that talks about how do we develop pathways to achieve in a positive way, and it connects. In my mind, really closely with gratitude, right? Gratitude
Mhm.
is where we are, it's how we ground ourselves in the moment. But then how do we perceive our world moving forward? And how do we start to make change? And how do we do that with hope? And that really, is part of the philosophy and this idea of the science of hope, right? Hope isn't a wish. It's something you have to actively do. And that's the same thing with gratitude, right? It's an
Mhm.
action that you have to take. It's a framework. It's something you have to do. And so we're throwing some things in there around hope score, right? In the science of hope, they created a hope score, and you can go and figure out for free online, what is your hope score and how can you start to change your hope score and what actions can you take to view
Mhm.
the world differently, to control your emotions kind of in that pathway to do that. And so I think that
Mhm.
it's a mindset. And so as we
Yep.
think about gratitude, we think about hope, we think about what do you need to do and not just be passive in these things. So oftentimes people kind of just get down, they get, bombarded with the media, all the negative things happening around them in the world. And when we have to think about, where are the positive lights around us and how can we focus more on that and still focus and move ourselves forward?
Yep. And so both of these practices, thinking about hope, and both of these lead toward resilience. And so having a gratitude practice helps build that hope muscle, which helps build resilience. And resilience is what I call a bounce back ability. It
Yep.
really is that being able to bounce back when we fall or fail. And we all fall and fail. Some people fall, fail, and never get back up, and other people fall, fail, and bounce up. And then the ability to rebound, to bounce, to go on to the next step, that piece is a muscle that you have to practice. One of the challenges I have, and I'm not, well, I am going to say it. So parents right now don't want their kids to fail. One of the bad things about that, if you don't let your kids fail when they're little, is they don't learn this skill and they don't learn resilience. And then when you can no longer protect them and they're teenagers and young adults and out on their own, and then they fail, they don't got the skill because they weren't taught in a protected environment to lose.
Hmm.
And when we don't teach kids how to lose well and to fail well, that's a missing skill. And so we're seeing, unfortunately, some younger generations of folks who didn't get this opportunity. And I think there's some theories out there. Gen X, where I group, a lot of us were just sort of thrown out there to fail all the time without a lot of support. And those became parents that were very overprotective because they weren't not protective, so they were overprotective. So we've gone from one side to the other, and we really need kids to learn this. And it's not just kids, young adults. I think about our folks in prison. We have to give them the ability to get
Hmm.
out on parole, to try it. They fail, they come back, and you have to teach again, like how do you do this better the next time? And so it really is an important skill that you have to learn for resilience, and being grateful about what is right in this moment is really important. So changing those conversations, not just talking about everything that they've done wrong, but okay, what was successful in that? Even though you were only out, think about prison, you were out 2 years. What was successful to keep you out for 2 years? What went right? To help them think about that, because they can be grateful for that and also have hope that they could do it again.
And this can be really hard to do because I have a lot of candid conversations. I happen to be working on a project right now, and we're going around and we're highlighting opportunities to get better in communities for organizations to do better with the resources they have. And sometimes you're sitting with the CEO and they hear only what they perceive as the bad things,
Right.
the things that they're doing wrong, the areas of their leadership that may not be strong. And we're trying to balance that with you have these really great things happening over here. How can we focus on building that up so that then we're not focusing on these other areas that you might need help in? And I think that's really hard, right? Because sometimes we don't want to hear the positive things. We just focus on those things that are the negatives, and that can really impact your ability to be a leader as well.
Yeah. In my office, I know I've said this on the podcast before, but we start every meeting with what we call wins, or what's going right, or what's good happening. And I'm telling you, it's hard sometimes for people to get into that groove. I have a couple people, they probably swear I planted them, but I didn't. But they're always the one to say something first because they know that if they don't, nobody will. So they always try. And I appreciate that for them. But it is hard because we remember and retell the stories of the terrible things so much more often than the good things that we should be bragging about. A lot of us, we get told it's bragging if you say the positives, or if you've done something well yourself, and oh, I want to be humble, this whole thing. But that's actually not helpful in this space because you're not being honest about what's going okay. And so you end up just over emphasizing the negative. And there is research to show that too. If you have a month and you had like 3 days of the bad of that month, if you didn't write it down to actually track it, your brain remembers the 3 bad days. You don't remember the 27 or 28, depending on the month, good days, because you focus on those three bad. And that's science also. And so, again, this being grateful in the moment to think of what's good in this moment, in this day, is a practice that helps just recenter you. Now, you're still going to have those bad times and you're still going to remember those bad times, but you can kind of help balance it. And then, like the work you're doing, that's really important because sometimes they feel like, oh, we only get together like this when we're going to talk about the bad. And so
Right.
then they don't look forward to coming together. Then we always wonder, well, why don't they continue getting together? Well, if it's only focused on negative, why would you? Right? It's like my heart can't take that. Why would we always
Right.
get together just to complain, Then there's other groups that they only get together to complain, I guess. They
That's
just
true.
really like
I've
it.
been
So,
there.
you got to kind of balance.
It makes me think, Renee, of some of the hard times I've had to be grateful. And, when we're traveling in rural areas a lot, and so we've been on the road most of the month of October. I think I stayed in hotels for over half the month of October as we went and had these tough conversations from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day. And it was hard a couple times to have gratitude when I couldn't stay in my favorite hotel chain because they don't exist. And so I had to kind of psych myself up because I wanted a good night's sleep. But sometimes there's not a lot of choices. So it was a little struggle for me to be grateful to have a hotel room and, to be on the road because that could be challenging too, right? Our work, sometimes it's hard to find the grateful things. But at the end of the
Well,
day, it all worked out. But, you have
yes,
to you have to be
yes,
ready for those things because I could have easily been in a bad mood or been
yes,
cranky, or not gotten good sleep had I not been in the right mindset. And so it's kind of a
yeah,
funny example, but it's a regular everyday example that we all face sometimes. And we can
yeah.
make a choice of how we're going to respond to those moments, right?
Yeah. And for those listening, they had to break their cardinal rules of not traveling on Mondays and Tuesdays when you're
Yeah.
traveling rural, because traveling Mondays and Tuesdays in rural, you can't find places open to eat. Lots of
Uh,
places are closed
I
Mondays
went
and Tuesdays.
50 miles without being able to get a mocha. And I refuse to go to scooters. There are scooters in every rural community, but I wanted a local coffee shop.
Oh, geez.
And we had to go over 50 miles
First
to
world
find
problems here with no
this.
mocha.
It's
Not
true,
good for
but I was
Jason.
grateful when I
And he gets
found
a
it.
tat. Yeah. And he's very, it's not, I don't know, it's not hangry in that one. There's got to be a word for your minus
We need
mocha.
we
We
need
got
to
to come
find
up with
that
it
word.
because when Jason doesn't have it, it's not always a good thing. But yes, but it did make you more grateful once you did find it, right? Because it was more like a treasure hunt, and once you found it,
Right,
you're like, cool, I found this.
right.
So it does. It kind of resonates that. But it is interesting being on the road as much as you have been, and you can't do it in the better days of the week. You can't do it in the localities you want to be in, and it is more rural, and you're eating whatever you're eating. Mostly, my husband will say unremarkable, and I'm sure it meant other things, but that's what he'll call it. Nothing he wants to remember or recall. And so, and then
Six
that's not,
seven. We call it 6 7.
oh, God, six. Okay. That's fantastic. I love it. So, the Recovering Politician Self Care Policy of the Week. I've talked about this before, but this really is my favorite app, and it is for gratitude. It's called the 5 Minute Journal app by Intelligent Change. It does a couple of things. Once you can prompt yourself a couple of times a day on what you're grateful for. You can set an intention for the day. You can talk about like have an affirmation of your day of something you may be working on. You can use it. You also, though, it has a tracker for you about you can just do like, I think it's five little emojis of how your day went, from poor to good. And so if you're a person who only remembers the negative, like a lot of people are, you can use that and then go back and look at your month and see, okay, how many bad days did I have? And that has been shown. We didn't go into the details today in data, but for people with chronic pain, one of the things that they've really tried to work on for them is help them realize how many good days they did have, because your brain again over functions on and focuses on the negative. And so being able to say, look, I actually had 2 good weeks here, and then dive into that and find out what was different about your 2 weeks that maybe made you less pain, or and less depressed or whatever, because maybe you had better diet, maybe you got outside more, maybe you had more walks, maybe a lot of things. But if you aren't conscious of the fact that those 2 weeks were even better, then you don't even dive into what triggered the better, right? And so then you're only focused on the terrible days and the triggers of the negative, when we have to be thinking about, yes, there's triggers for bad things to happen, but there's triggers for good things to happen too. And so when you feel good, you've often done things that we don't think about to make you feel good. I feel great today. We went out for dinner last night. I drank water, and so I can't do caffeine at night. Sometimes I can have alcohol, but I made a conscious choice and I feel different today. But if I don't think about that, right, it was just a glass of water. You just kind of like, but I do feel good this morning. I woke up early. I felt fine and I felt good. But it is those kind of small choices. And so we don't always put all that together. We just see the negative as, oh no, I drank alcohol. So now I feel bad. Well, maybe there's a whole lot of other days you don't and you feel good. So, thinking about how do you blend that. So that's one of my favorite apps. It's going to be in the show notes again, because I think it's a free version that's wonderful. It's really low cost if anybody else uses it, but I've used it forever and ever. And it has just really built a practice of gratitude, but now also tracking like how I'm doing, how I'm feeling. And you can put in notes, you can do lots of things. So if you're really into journaling, it really is built as a journal, but it's also very simple if you're not a journaler, because not everybody likes to journal. So it's more of a click, click, click instead of writing by hand a whole lot of stuff, which some people love that, but not me. So, Jason, did you have any thoughts about practicing? I know for you, you've talked about gratitude in the past. Is there anything that helps you in that practice or helps you try to? You just mentioned some about having to reset your mind about not having your favorite hotel chain. But other than that, do you think of things that like help you kind of like stay grounded when you're on the road so much that you found
You
that
know,
works?
I think it's focusing on the positive, and part of the rules we created when we built Rural Policy Partners was that we're only going to do this as long as it's fun. And so building in, the stops at I was at the tallest point, the monument in the state of Iowa, the tallest point in the state of Iowa. And so I didn't
Yes.
even know there was a monument at the tallest point at 1600, and I think it's 1670 feet. And the experience was
6,
1670.
7.
It's true.
It's
And
7.
so, if you're up on the Minnesota border north of Sibley, it's a fun stop, right? It was 5 minutes in the rain and it was dark. Like we had just stopped for supper and we were trying to get to the next location for an overnight until we had meetings first thing in the morning on the opposite end of the state. Um, but being grateful for those moments, right?
Yeah.
Taking those opportunities for yourself. And so it's just not about the grind of getting to the next job, to do the next thing. It's about experiencing the journey all along the way. And so that's the mindset that, when
Yep.
we started Rural Policy Partners, we said, this is the only way we're going to do this, because I'm not looking to burn out. I'm not looking to do all those things and get stressed out, and try to control things that are out of my control. It's about what does this journey look like? And so I think that's a great example of kind of taking 5 minutes to do ridiculous things changes your mindset. It changes the way you view the world. And so that's how I am able to find gratitude in things every day.
Yep. So in the show notes today, we put a book called The Gratitude Project, How the Science of Thankfulness Can Rewire Our Brains for Resilience, Optimism, and the Greater Good. So that's in there along with the other things that Jason had mentioned. But before we go, so today we talked about gratitude. We talked all about the science behind it and how it really does not only improve your mental health, but your physical health. It really has been researched now. So for those of you that are not sure that sounds kind of woo-woo, it's not a practice, there's actually science behind it. So you too can dive in and learn more about it. And we have a lot of things here in the show notes. But before you go, don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. And if you leave us a positive review, we'll send you guys a prize. Have a great day, everybody.